Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.
Third Degree, the podcast is brought to you by Soccer90.com. It's the holiday season, and Soccer90.com has got you covered. They've got jerseys, the scarves, the jackets, the cleats, the t-shirts, at every club you could like. International clubs, national teams, FC Dallas, North Texas Soccer Club. They really do have it all. Third Degree listeners using code Third Degree at checkout get 20% off. Soccer90.com, code Third Degree. Some exclusions may apply.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to another episode. This one is in the numerical order place of 241 of Third Degree, the podcast. Hi, I'm Peter. We are without Dan Crook today, but somehow we are with your hero, my hero, everybody's hero, editor, founder, thirddegree.net, the original Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
Hi, Peter. Happy Hanukkah to those that celebrate. I'm sure Dan is just getting overloaded with work leading into the holidays because, I'm sure all his things have to be taken care of well before he goes away or whatever. So.
Well, I just want the good, curious person listening to this to know how dedicated Buzz is to this podcast and to them as a curious, because we are actually recording this while his beloved Newcastle are fighting for their Champions League lives.
Yeah.
So instead of watching the second half of the Newcastle match, who are they playing? Oh, Milan.
Milan, yeah.
And Pulisic just scored for Milan.
Which I didn't know.
Which you didn't see because you turned it off.
Yeah.
No, Buzz wants to record his FC Dallas podcast instead. So kudos to the buzzard.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, well, it's a gig economy. You got to do what you got to do. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, so I don't know how much we have to talk about today. So this may be a short episode, but I say that and have a feeling we're going to end up going, wow, an hour blew by fast.
Yeah. Usually when you say that, we end up with an hour plus.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, let's see. So I think the first thing that I want to talk about is the release of names of how all the deals worked out across MLS and what players are available, the free agent list, like which was declined, what wasn't declined, specifically for Dallas, and then what does that mean in terms of who's out there and available within the league for Dallas to consider to pick up?
Well, listen, MLS overcomplicates these things.
You say.
Yeah. And the reason they do that is because they don't want free agency. They thought they actually were adamant for decades that they would never allow free agency. And they finally have given in on basically like really old dudes. And they're not going to give in on young people because the whole idea is to keep, the costs of doing this thing within reason. So young guys go through what's called a waiver draft, which is like every other league in the world. If a guy gets waived, NFL, NBA, whatever, there's a waiver draft, you can grab a guy. In all these drafts, by the way, FC Dallas this year is picking 15th. That's where they ended up in the standings, basically right smack dab in the middle. And in between the waiver draft and and being a complete free agent, by the way, Jimmy Maurer is the only complete free agent that FC Dallas has, is what they call the reentry draft. Now, there's a couple of versions of it. Who cares? What matters is that if you pick a guy in the reentry draft, you have to take his salary as it was, basically, or with like depending on which one you do, maybe it's a little bit more than what it was. So you'll see that like in the waiver draft, you might get league wide, you might get two guys grabbed. In the reentry draft, the two versions of it, you might get 6 or 7 each time. Not very much. Most people go through both of those processes and then end up, in a worldwide sense, being a free agent, although in MLS terms, the rights revert back to the team. So basically at the end of this window, Jimmy Maurer is 100% complete free, and everybody else Dallas declined options on would revert back to them in MLS terms in terms of them holding the rights. So if somebody wanted them, they could then trade for their rights. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to play for Dallas. It just means that like if they come back to MLS, like I said, MLS makes this overly complicated and stupid. So the same people are gone as before. Facundo, Martinez, Colin Smith is in the waiver section. Nothing really changes in terms of outbound players for Dallas based on any of these things. The only thing that's fun to talk about is there anybody on all these lists that you think your team might be interested in? So that's the fun part.
And of the other teams' list, is there anybody in particular or people in particular that you think they should consider picking up?
Sure. Well, I have a couple. I'm sure that the team might have one or two more. But, like, for example, we talked about Kellen Acosta the other day. He's a free agent. So, like, you can just bid for his services outright. So can anybody else. Now, he's, of course, mentioned for years that he's interested in Europe. But, money talks. So you never know.
I do wonder if Kellen's even too old now to get like a legitimate European deal unless he's willing to go to some secondary league.
Oh, yeah. No, more than likely you're right because he is 28. I mean, if he's going now, it's a team that wants him just for now. There's no more like potential buy there. It's only in his current value. So you'd be looking at, MLS and LAFC equivalency. So you're talking about, championship or, your Hollands or your Belgiums or something, maybe lower Spain, I suppose, you're not talking about Bayern Munich calling, so that's what you're competing with. And MLS monetarily can compete with those teams. So, would Dallas get in there? Would he want to come to Dallas? I have no idea, but he's a name. If we keep moving on, Miles Robinson, of course, in Atlanta, spectacular center back. Also, of course, talking about going to Europe, but, make a call him up, offer him DP money, see what happens. That's a great player.
Would you, if he was amenable to that, would you do a DP on Miles Robinson?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Age and talent and ability. Oh yeah. He's a spectacular player for sure. For me, for DP. And then you can get into guys like, Yerson Mascara, who's the Cincinnati center back. Technically he plays for Wolves. They loaned him here for a year. So he is still under contract for Wolves. And MLS terms, the loan ended. And so he's a free agent, technically, sort of, in terms of MLS, but not really, because he's under contract. But if Wolves was loaning him out last year, why wouldn't they loan him out again this year, potentially? So that's a guy that interests me. He started 26 games for Cincinnati last year. And then you can look at some reserve guys like, for me, maybe like if you're keeping Jesus or if you're going after a different 9 and you're buying out JJ Jimenez, right? You still need a body there. So maybe like a Justin Renix from New England might be a nice young backup striker, perhaps. So there's bodies out there and there's guys on these lists that can fill roles for you. You could even do like, as we get into discussions of other positions, we could talk about like for example, if you want Ira Mendy to play some 8 at certain times, do you want to just have Frazier as a 6? Maybe you call Dax McCarty or Victor Ulloa, who both out of contract, and be like, hey, I need a guy to start 5 or 6 games maybe. Or just mainly be a backup and a leader and help kids out and be on the bottom of my roster but get paid. You know what I mean? So there are some positions of lower roster need. And remember that there's a macro idea at play here that was brought up in the press conference, and Coach had already talked to me about anyway, that they want to broaden their depth in the bottom half of the roster to better be able to handle the workload of games with Leagues Cup, Open Cup run, play out, whatever you got with these larger loads of games that are coming. They made a mistake last year with all those injuries. So expect a couple of veterans maybe somehow, and free agency might be a way to do it.
Okay, so let's simplify this for the listener because there's a lot there, and I think we could really get into a ton of minutia if we tried to. So why don't you let's do it this way. Let's break it up by general positional places on the field. Are there a striker or strikers, forward positions, whether they be wide or central, that you think would be a really keen option for Dallas to pick up, other than somebody that may be different than somebody you already named?
Off the pile. Well, let's first talk about what's really important to understand. Clearly, I think everyone agrees that they need a center back, having let Martinez go, right? Even if you want Sebastian Ibeagha to be a starter, you still need a guy who can push him into Kosi. So obviously they would go for a center back on some level. And after that, sorry, go ahead. Did you have a question on that?
Well, no, I'm just trying to go. How do you want to
there? I'll get there.
Wait, so you want to go by what Dallas's positional needs are instead of just by position?
Yeah, because in order to get into forward versus wing, I wanted to lay out what the positions of need are first.
Okay.
So that's why I bring up the center back is very clear and obvious. And then after that, the discussion gets into, okay, if you want to talk about how Dallas gets better and competes for next year, you have to add, I think, 15 goals. And Coach has said that they want to get better offensively. They need to get better. They need to score more. They need to get better with who they have. They need to get pieces. So then you have to decide, which way does Dallas go? Do they believe in Jesus as the 9, Or do they do what I suggested, which is that he doesn't necessarily always want to be a 9. So do you put him at wing or 10 or something? And that decision has to be made because they're not going to IR Alan Velasco. They've said that, right? We hope they're going to buy out Jimenez. They better. Really, you only have, because you're stuck with Allen, because you have Paul Arriola as a DP, because you have Jesus as a DP, right? In order to do something really active and nice, really aggressive, you cleared Facundo's money and you cleared Martinez's money. Well, we just said you need Martinez's money for a center back. So right this second, all you really have is Facundo's money, which is basically one TAM player, not a big superstar. So that can't get you Miles Robinson, for example. But it might get you Kellen, maybe about something or just close to $1 million, probably maybe might get you Kellen. So then that's what you have to sit there and think. Okay, if I want to add 15 goals and I don't really have all that much money to move, how do I do that? And that's where you get into these ideas of like, you can't do both a 9 and a wing. Probably you can figure out the money to go get one. So you have to decide what, and we have to, in order to play this game, we have to decide, do they like Jesus as a 9 or do they like him as a wing? And where could they move somebody out to make a move? Because then at that point you can start diving into, once you know what you want to do, you can start digging into these free agency lists. And to be fair, when you're talking about a goal scorer, like a wing or a 9, anyone that really makes you excited will not have ended up as a free agent. There's not going to be anybody in the free agent lists that's going to get you 15 goals a year, I don't think. And I look through there and I actually don't see anybody. So that's a long way of saying that when you want to talk about forward and wing, there aren't any in the free agency pool. You have to do something else, basically. Does that make sense to you?
It does. I was trying to make this simple. So,
there is no simple answer.
No. I think there is a simple answer, but I understand why you're trying to provide the context. The simple answer is there really isn't anybody in the pile that would really fit Dallas in terms of forward.
Yeah, not in terms of forward. Like I'm looking through the lists of players that are being talked about as being quality free agents, and I don't see anybody. I mean, you're talking about like a Tom Bogert or Maxi Urruti.
Yeah, no, we've done that.
Will Bruin, right? None of these things are Diego Rubio from the Rapids, who was a DP. Right? Like none of these things are making you go, ooh. Corey Baird, Houston had a really nice year, but again, he's more of a wing off striker, like a very similar profile to Jesus, taller than Jesus, but same profile.
Yeah.
So does that like, I like Corey Baird on an island. Do I like him when I already have Jesus? Not really. Like I either want like the Fafa Pico's in here, right? But there's a pure wing that may be sort of interesting, but he already burned his bridges here. Joseph Martinez. Do you really want to spend his money when he hasn't done squat in like 3 years now after all those injuries he had?
No.
You know what I mean? Like, so.
No, that's kind of why I asked the question. Yeah. So okay. So now let's move to midfield. Is there anybody in the pile that you think fits a profile that would help Dallas?
Yeah, Kellen.
Okay.
Kellen's the one. But they're probably, if I were to really dig into these, Brian Acosta's out, option decline, but I don't want that guy. There probably are some bodies in here, but for me, the one that makes the absolute most sense is Kellen Acosta until you get down into, like I mentioned, depth pieces. Like Michael Barrios is available, but at his age, would you want that?
Man, there's a lot of been there, done that.
Yeah, there's Dax McCarty, there's Victor Ulloa. All these guys that are free agents are the ones who, like Jimmy Maurer, have been around a long time and they're kind of at the end of their career.
Hey, wait a second. Would you take Victor back?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, I would too.
Yeah, I would. Yeah. Or Dax, either one. I think there's a place on a roster for a low salary. Now, nobody get upset that I'm going to say, 150 to 200,000 is a low salary. We're talking about professional athletes.
Right.
That's a low salary for them. That's almost like a not quite reserve roster, but that's pretty close to it. And you're not going to play a lot of games, but I love you in my locker room. I love you for what you could teach to kids. I really only need you like for the games where I need to start Frazier, and because I'm going to put Yaramendi as an 8, and I need you on the bench to be a 6 to come in, or if Frazier gets hurt, you're my second 6 at that point. You got to cover your bases, cover your bets. So like a depth 6 makes a lot of sense to me. Or if you're 100% convinced that Armindi is your 6, maybe a depth 8, because Sebastian, we've noticed, got hurt last year. He's already in his 30s. Paxton can't start 34 games. Velasco's out for the year, right? We're starting to run out of bodies at the 8. So if you've got, again, Calvin can play 8, right? So can Dax probably. You can dig into these. Jack Price is available from Colorado. You can look at these guys and you can see bodies that could help me, but none of them are flash or exciting. And it's like, honestly, there's like
season changers.
Yeah. They're role player veterans that are late in their career and maybe they can help you a little bit. So like that's what these free agents available really are. There's no big gigantic superstar free agent because MLS doesn't allow free agency like that. Unless you like a Nick Ladero who's like 34 or a Carlos Vela who you can't afford, like things like that. Does Kai Kamara do anything for you? He's like 38 or whatever he is,
Right.
I'm just saying there are bodies there that can do something for you, but none of them are going to make you that 15 goals better. That's going to make you a better team rather than just a team that'll survive.
Okay. And I know we mentioned Miles and a couple of other people already, just to make sure we've covered it. Anybody in the back end?
Do you like Omar Gonzalez
No.
at his age?
No.
It's like they're other than Miles Robinson, who's prime for age group, or Yerson Mosquera, who again really belongs to Wolves. There's dudes like that all up and down this thing. Jan Grey Goose is a player at Minnesota that looks pretty good from time to time. You can find Emmanuel Boateng. I think it's a left back actually, which might not help you all that much. You can find guys that can solve problems for you, that can help you, but not someone that can make you better. And that's true all up and down the free agency list.
And I'm asking just because I want to make sure I cover it, but this is going to lead us into our next topic. We don't need to bother even looking at the goalkeeper list, correct?
You might. We
Why
can talk
is
about that. Well, you want to go to the next topic because that'll tell you why you might.
Okay, which is we mysteriously out of the blue. I think we've all known that Julian Eyestone's situation at Duke was a bit in question. I think we all kind of had an idea of what was going to happen in terms of him going pro, but out of the blue, from nowhere, he announced on his Instagram account the other day that he is leaving Duke and quote unquote turning pro.
Yep.
Now I read that and thought, oh, wow, this means he's going somewhere else other than Dallas, because if he was going to Dallas, this would happen in conjunction with an announcement from Dallas, but that never came. But you're telling me that this actually means nothing and means something completely different.
Yes, it means something completely different because he has a responsibility to Duke. Duke's an elite program, and they will need a goalkeeper if he's leaving. So if he never says anything, if Duke is out recruiting or Duke's looking in the portal, every single goalie they talk to is like, dude, you have Eyestone. You're insane. Why would I come to Duke? They needed to be able to tell recruits, portal or otherwise, that no, Eyestone's leaving. Don't take our word for it. Here's his social media post that says he's leaving. But, you and I and people like us have assumed he was only doing on one and done at Duke for a long, long time. So this is not a surprise. It doesn't change anything in terms of could he come into FC Dallas or is he going to Europe? It doesn't answer that question either way. But what it does tell us is that it's one step closer to happening, whatever it is, because he wouldn't have done this if he didn't have some sort of tacit agreement, at least on the table with somebody, because otherwise you don't burn your bridge at Duke until you have to, right? Even if they're telling us, hey, if you think you're going, no, you say, no, I'm gonna wait until it's 100%. So we can assume that. Sorry.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm interrupting you. I was gonna. Yeah, go ahead.
So we can assume that he's, very clearly that he's coming pro one way or the other. Now the time frame is, everybody remembers, he doesn't turn 18 until April. So the two things that could be happening are he's signing a homegrown deal with Dallas, or he's gonna do some sort of pre-contract or whatever with a team in Europe to be able to go to that team in April. It'll be one of those two things. So if you're an FC Dallas fan and you want him to come here, then if we can just throw together sort of an elusive sort of timeline here, let's assume this week MLS league offices are overwhelmed with reentry drafts and waivers this and other things that, and all these contracts that are expiring. And then next week is the actual draft. They'll be overloaded with that. And then it's the holidays, and then they're short staffed and FC Dallas will be closed probably. So let's assume best case scenario, if he's coming to Dallas, you'd see some sort of contract, I'm going to guess, probably start to happen in the first week of January. And so an announcement and the little PR stuff with the photos or whatever else, first, second week of January. So if you're hoping he's coming here and you get to mid-January and you don't see anything, that's when I think you start to worry that they're not going to get him. That's sort of the process. And also in the meantime, if Dallas moves on a keeper in the free agency, bringing in a trialist, drafts somebody, if you see some of that activity from Dallas as a keeper, that also will be a pretty strong indicator that they've missed on him. So those are the things we're going to wait for now. We're going to wait for those two signs to tell us either they're going to be an announcement of him or you'll see Dallas dip into the keeper market, and that'll tell you whether he's coming or not.
All right.
So,
well, there's all the factual part of it. Now I
right.
want Buzz to do some speculation. So I'm thinking if I'm Julian Eyestone, the reality with Dallas is they've got a top-notch keeper in Martin Paz.
Yep.
I'm assuming Martin's here for at least another year or two, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, give or take.
All right. Then they've got Antonio Carrera, who obviously in his own right is climbing up the ranks. I mean, he's been doing national team duty at the youth level now for a bit.
Yeah.
And is there a world where Julian Eyestone has leapt over Antonio as the next number 2 on this team?
No, he's too young.
Okay.
There's a world where he's the 3 and then he starts every game at North Texas. And he's 2 when Antonio gets a call up to the Olympic team or another
somebody
U20,
gets hurt.
Yeah, somebody gets hurt. That's the question is like, there's no way you're getting him on a North Texas deal. So like an absolute worst case scenario is that if you signed him and it turned out you didn't think he could play yet, then you would just stash him at North Texas on a loan and then you would go sign a third keeper. But having watched Julian play with North Texas, I don't think that's the case. I think you'd be fine with him as your third guy. And then the questions become, what do you do with Antonio? Is like if you put Julian in North Texas at every single game, which would be great for him to start there for 2 seasons. Do you have Antonio just sit around and do nothing for a whole year while you're waiting for Paz? Maybe there's something to explore with Antonio in terms of a loan or something. But there's no scenario where Eyestone signs directly with North Texas, and there's no scenario where this season I don't think Julian would walk in and be number 2 ahead of Antonio. Antonio's quite good. It may be that one of more is worth more than the other long term, but right this minute, like if I have to start a game today, it's Antonio. Antonio's 20 and Julian is 17. That's a big difference. It doesn't mean that in 5 years it might be flipped, but so it basically is pretty straightforward for FC Dallas if they want a keeper. And in terms of like, does Julian like FC Dallas? Would he consider FC Dallas?
Well, hold on, but you're jumping ahead.
You're
jumping ahead.
No, sorry.
Because that's where I really want to look at this from Julian's point of view, which is reading the situation. I find this is one of my favorite, I'm most curious about processes because so many of us are new to all of this. Young local kids putting themselves in a situation to become professional soccer players and the opportunity to either play for their hometown club or go someplace else. And I think his situation is super fascinating because it is a reality. It's kind of the Weston McKennie deal where this kid is so good.
Yeah.
He may choose to go somewhere else in the world and Dallas may get nothing out of it.
Well, a little bit of this will be based on like how good I think he is. And that's, most people don't know that homegrown deals are limited by the CBA. It's like a box that you have to put them in that has a bottom end money and has a top end money. It's defined by the CBA. So for example, if you want a homegrown, you can't pay them $5 million a year. Like you have to pay them in the parameters of this homegrown. If you want to pay them more than that, then they're a DP. I mean, you can do that. You can pay a 17-year-old a DP money if you want. They'll think you're dumb, but you can do it. So there's a defined amount of money that's the most that Dallas could pay somebody like Julian. So then the question becomes, okay, I can tell you for a fact, based on conversations I've had with him and his people, they love FC Dallas. There's no downside here for them in terms of FC Dallas. They love the club. They love Drew Keyshawn, most of all, who's a phenomenal goalkeeper coach. The idea of like the amount of games you would get with North Texas and the quality of the training are all outstanding. So consider that, if you will, like a base. Right? That's where you're starting at. And so if you're a European team that is interested, you have to come in and beat that. That's my read from how conversations with him and his people over the last couple of years. So the trick is, I think people probably overestimate how much a 17-year-old going on 18-year-old might get paid in terms of being like on a high academy or reserve first team kind of level.
By Dallas or by
anybody
anybody?
in Europe?
In Europe. Okay.
I think it's not as much as people might think it is. Now, so that's what it'll come down to is, does somebody from Europe value him enough to outpay FC Dallas? FC Dallas isn't a crazy number, but it's a pretty good number in terms of just homegrowns in general. Right?
Do you know what that number is? Or can you, do you have like a ballpark of what that number would be?
Yeah. Basically, like the minimum is the reserve minimum, which I think is like 68,000 this last year, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And the maximum is up to like, I think it's like 125 maybe is the maximum, but you have to, it also has a structure. It has like year one, you're this number, year two, you're this number, year three, you're this number, and then option, you know, so like you can see, like if you look at the structures of the way that MLS rosters work, you can see the progression of the money. If you go look at guys that are currently going through this, look at what Nolan's on, look at what a guy that's in his second year is on, look at what the guy in his third year is on. So you can see what those monies, give or take, are. You know, they can vary a little bit within that structure. You know, what you can also change is whether you put North Texas years on the front end or not, which is out of the question for Julian. He's way too good for that. So you can ballpark these numbers, and let's just call it on average $100K over a 5-year deal, basically.
Okay. So do you think Eyestone is good enough, or has the potential to be good enough, that that some European team is willing to make him a deal that will exceed whatever Dallas is willing to put on the table?
Yeah, I do. I don't think, though, that that's the only factor. So, like, let's say, for example, a Turkish team comes in with $150,000 a year over 5 years. Would you take that? But you got to go live in Turkey. And what's the coaching situation like? Do the checks clear? You know, no offense to that particular club, but you can see many places where that kind of money won't equal to, in a player's mind, the opportunity with FC Dallas, the coaching, the security, I get to live in Dallas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And then on the other hand, there's teams that could come in and might go, here's the same money, but we're Bayern Munich. Right. And you're going to be on one of the greatest teams in the world. Now, I don't think that's particularly likely. You know, a Bayern Munich, I don't think he's that good. But, you know, somewhere between there is a balance of a team with a great program and a really nice coaching setup and a great opportunity with money that's equal to or better than FC Dallas, and that's when you lose him. And I don't know if that's out there. I think it probably is out there. So I'm going to say, if I'm picking a guess right this minute, I'm going to go 50-50 that he's here versus not here.
Oh, that's just the crappiest answer, Buzz Carrick. I want you to speculate.
Well, the speculation is that there absolutely will be a team with more money than that. The question will be, is it more money and a good program, or is it more money and it's a place I really don't want to go play football?
Right.
Which is a very different question.
Yeah. How many times have we seen kids go off somewhere that we're like, really? You want to? I mean, the Fabian Castillo story is the best one, right? He ends up in Turkey, and you're like, are you sure that's the right place for it? But, you know.
Or Reggie at Boa Vista.
On paperwork, that's
remember
a great
how
one.
Great we thought that deal was? Like, it had the whole Lille connection, and it was like, you're going to be there a year, then you're going to go to France, and that's a club that wants to sell. What a great opportunity. And then it turned out to be a shit show because the owner changed, and then they ran out of money, and then now Reggie had to fight his way out through court and all this stuff and didn't get paid for like a year or whatever. So, you know, things can look good on paper and not be. So, you know, when you're 17, 18 years old, this is a very, very important decision, and money is not everything. And, you know, he's got really smart people around him. So it's going to be fascinating to watch how this one goes.
It is, because, you know, we've got several different iterations of this same thing. I mean, if you think about the Pepe situation, we all kind of knew on the onset that probably wasn't a great opportunity for Pep Ricardo. Based on the club and the situation, we all kind of went, is that going to work? Is that really? I mean, I know it's a ton of money and you kind of have to take it. It's a great deal for Dallas, but is it the right place for Ricardo? And it obviously turned out not to be.
Even in that case, that was even specifically about the way they played. We're like, Pepe's not a guy that creates his own scoring opportunities. He needs assists and service, and that team does not have that. And we were like, that's a bad fit. Well, PSV has that, and look how good he is.
Right. And then let's alternatively look at Tanner Tessman, who ends up going to Venezia, and we're all like, Really? You really want to go? Okay. And that's turned out fantastic for Tanner.
Yeah, I even checked with him before they got relegated, and he was like, no, this is going to be great. The coach loves me. We go down, I'm going to be the man. And he is the man.
He is.
So, yeah. I mean, there's now a team circling to buy him at the end of this season. There's some Italian noise or whatever else.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
well,
a couple teams are circling.
Lots and lots of fun. So Buzz Carrick has reported officially that Julian Eyestone is going to make a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, he will eventually.
And play professional football as a goalkeeper somewhere on the planet of Earth.
Yeah. I mean, compared to a normal 18-year-old, he's going to make a lot of money. The next one will be the huge one. Like, no matter where you go, do you progress over the next 4 years? That the next deal's a banger.
So you're officially reporting that Julian Eyestone is not signing with a club on the moon.
No.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's correct. He will be playing. I mean, I'm not even reporting that. He's the one that said that. He said, I'm going pro. He did not clarify the moon, so I will add in the moon part. He's not playing.
You can confirm from your sources he's not playing
on
a planet
strongly,
or in a celestial body other than the planet Earth.
I feel strongly he's not going to Medellin. Feel like I'm safe. And probably not SC Barcelona, probably not that club. Okay. Bovis is probably out.
Yeah, probably a Russian club.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah,
probably not a Ukrainian club.
Yeah, I would not go to Ukraine right now. That's probably pretty safe.
All right,
Turkey's probably out, I bet.
The other thing that has popped up, I think it came out today. The man with the mustache, Tom Bogert, reported that Liga MX teams are back poking around on Paul Arriola.
Can I be a cynical bastard for a minute?
I know exactly what you're going to say.
Let's say you're a club with a player that perhaps underperformed and you need to add 15 goals and you'd like to sell said player. Would it not behoove you to leak hey, there's a bunch of Mexican teams interested in my player, San Diego, nudge, nudge, hint, hint, or whoever else? No, look, the price is going to be steep. Please go on Liga MX.
Oh, so you're thinking, I see. I was thinking maybe it was his agent that was poking this out. You're saying it may be Dallas.
The cynical bastard in me is suggesting that Dallas is leaking that.
You cynical
in order to
bastard.
Because if you want to add 15 goals,
it's
Paul
not coming
Arriola
from
is
Paul.
Quite expensive. It's not coming from him. Even when he's in form, he ain't 15. And you got Bernie and you got Allen. So
yeah, but then you have to subtract Paul's goals. Oh.
I think he had 2 this last year. But, look back at his really great season 2 years ago. But, again, it's now 2 years later. He's now approaching 30. It's like maybe the prices could be really high for San Diego. They just signed their first player.
He's going to be sweepy because he's going to be a daddy.
Maybe really Liga MX teams are really coming in for him. If that's true, then you definitely leak it to up the price and make those teams compete against each other.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the agent. But, the cynic in me thinks maybe it was FC Dallas.
We're in agreement, though. If somebody says, here's a fair stack of cash for Paul Arriola, you sell him.
Yes, for all the reasons we just mentioned. You can love Paul Arriola, but in the end, the offseason is ruthless. If the money is right, then you do the deal because the value of even peak Paul Arriola versus the amount of offense you're missing is the question. I need to do something or I'm going to be sitting here doing nothing. So that's kind of the expendable piece. I would say the same thing about Leggett. I bet you Leggett's expendable at 30 plus.
Oh, yeah. I'd
right?
have to.
If somebody calls for Leggett, I'd be like, sure, Becky B value, give me the money. Right? If you want to get better, if you don't want to get better, you don't give a shit, then fine, just sit here, do nothing. But
well, I know, and there's a very real possibility that in 8 weeks' time, we're having this conversation, and we're like, we're kind of in the same roster we were in 8 weeks ago.
Yeah, if they don't buy out Jimenez to get themselves to move, if they don't move something like an Arriola or Leggett, if they don't add anything in midfield, if they don't add a wing, if they don't, or even if they do get a center back, that's like last year where they got Seba Sibiaga. We like that move, but like that by itself, we could be looking at the exact same team basically. Mm-hmm. We could be. Hopefully we don't, but we could be.
Well, we've said this multiple times in the last few weeks. As it is every offseason, this is an opportunity for the Hunts to kind of show us their hand in terms of ambition.
Yes.
And I feel like this is more so the offseason for doing that than it has been lately, just based on the fact that it's Nico's third season.
Well, the biggest reason is the Messi bounce.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because the whole league is going to bounce up because of Messi. Because of the money, everyone made more money. Everyone now looks at that and goes, crap, I better do some things. The whole league is going to take a bigger step than usual forward. Right? There's some new rules coming that we don't know about yet. Don Garber said there's no fourth DP, but he did say there's some very specific rules that are going to get voted on in the owners committee like this week that will help the teams do blah, blah, blah. He didn't go into any details. So everybody out there is going to take a step, maybe even some big steps. Mm-hmm. So this year, even more than normal, if you stand pat, you're going to go backwards in a hurry. So they're going to have to do something or they're going to be in last place next year.
Okay.
Yeah. Not to bring everybody down, but basically that's where we're at, you know.
Well, it's 100% on the Hunts in the front office.
Yes.
To show is to prove where their head is at, and we can all sit here and run through all the free agent lists and dig through FB Ref and transfer market and dig up all the players you want. At the end of the day, we're going to have a very, very clear sense as to how the Hunts' attitude is about this.
Circle back to the highest paid players last year, right? Jesus is fine. Paul underperformed. Allen's basically out for the year. Jesus Jimenez is trash. You want to get rid of him. Leggett is okay, but maybe you could upgrade there. Facundo's gone. Paxton's fine, except he gets hurt a lot. Martinez is gone. And then the next one is Ibiaga. So those are your top 10 paid players on the team. And you cannot compete if those players are not performing. Mm-hmm. And over half of them didn't perform. So if you don't fix that spot, and they got rid of Facundo, they got rid of Martinez, right? So Allen's hurt. They got to get rid of Jimenez. And so then you have to start looking at what else can we do? Can we move Paul? Can we move Leggett? Can we do something to can we move Paxton? Well, you and I love Paxton, and let's be real about that. Let's be analytical for a second. You probably can't move Jesus because he's too important for you. Probably don't want to.
Right.
So you got to do something. And those are the only things really available to you to make your team significantly better. Those positions have to hit. DPs have to hit, and you're already going to have one DP that's valueless next year. So there you are. Man, I'm telling you, this offseason got nuts in a hurry. Allen getting hurt just really crushed them in terms of, and Paul falling apart. They're in a bad shape if they don't do some stuff. Honestly,
I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
And, I'm trying to find this thing that I had. There was something I had written down somewhere.
Ansa's not the answer, Eugene Ansa, right? We love E.R. Mendy, but he's not going to get you 15 goals.
Right.
Farfan, Obrian, even if you bring him back, you're going to lose 6 or 7 goals right there too, that you don't have him back. Hopefully when you add somebody good, it's not a problem, but where in the world are you going to get 15 more goals out of this team you currently have now? Well, the answer is you're going to go backwards. Is what's gonna happen.
I'm trying to find this thing that I had dug up the other day, and I noticed it on the heels of watching Columbus win MLS Cup over the weekend. Actually, that was a pretty good game, by the way.
It was a great game, wasn't it?
Yeah, Andy, the guy that co-hosts the Kick Round with me, Andy Swift.
We all know who Andy Swift is.
I'm a radio guy. I'm always resetting. You have new audiences.
Right.
Sorry, that's just the broadcasting professional in me. Anyway, So Andy was at the game. It was the first time Andy had been at the new stadium. He says it's great. He says it's really intimate on the inside. He says he was actually surprised how bare bones it is. When you see it in person, he says he feels like Q2 feels like a more state-of-the-art facility.
I was going to ask how it compared to Austin because I've been there.
But he says it's a nicer facility than Austin's because it's all enclosed and roofed. He said, obviously in the game it was pouring rain. He says I was as dry as I could possibly be.
Nice. And
he said it's super loud and because of the roof, and he really enjoyed the facility and thought it was great. The game was fantastic.
Yeah.
The thing I wanted to point out, because this really blew me away, and this is indicative of why I watched the Columbus team, and I think everybody feels this way because Columbus was an incredibly fun team. Is it okay if we move on to something else, Buzz? I'm sorry, we've gotten away from roster. I want to.
We're good. Move on. Yep.
Watching Columbus play, and really just be an insanely entertaining team to watch. What I was really struck by were all the numbers about how many goals they scored this year. I think the total numbers of goals they scored this year set an MLS record, I think it was. across all competitions, or they tied the total number of goals across all competitions in a season. It was like 82 or something crazy like that. And I was doing some math, and because I was also surprised by how many goals they had given up.
Yeah.
And they gave up in this season, Columbus did 46 goals,
league, yeah.
46 league goals. And then I think, well, Dallas had a really good season. That's actually 9 more than Dallas did. Dallas was at 37. And obviously Dallas was one of the lowest goals allowed all season. Seattle, I think, was first at 32.
Yep.
But now juxtapose that with the fact that Dallas only scored 41 goals and Columbus in the league alone scored 67 goals.
Yeah, plus 21 goal difference for them.
It's and that to me really quantifies what bothers me the most about this season for Dallas, which is this sense that when I watch Columbus play, that is a team that is out there playing to win the game.
Yeah.
Dallas always feels like they're playing not to lose under Nico, specifically this season. Now, maybe that's a byproduct of injuries, and I'm just trying to get the most. I'm trying to make lemonade out of lemons situation. I'm not sure that's the case, but man, I really would prefer to see Dallas get to an attitude and a spirit that we saw out of Columbus this season.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's where that it needs to add 15 goals came from. Basically, it was their goal differential is 4, and the elite teams in that conversation are, St. Louis, Cincinnati, Columbus, 17, 18, 21, Orlando's at 16, Philly's at 16. This is goal differential, mind you. LAFC 15 goal differential, and Dallas is at 4. So if you want to be in that elite conversation of teams, it's not just that you have to have a good defense, it's you also have to have a good offense, or at least a balance between them two in a really highly positive manner. You could certainly be way, way worse, but that's where that comes from. And the proactiveness that you talk about, I think that the coach would like to play a much more possession-oriented game and a much more proactive game. It's just, I think this season in particular, just really he didn't have the bodies for it. Like, I think you can look at last year's road record compared to this year's road record, I think is or maybe not record, maybe mentality. Like, even more this year on the road, they really went like bunker and grind on the road compared to last year when they, I think, sometimes try to play a little more. I think that he would like to be a little more positive. But for me, what it really reflects the idea is that Dallas too often, for me, adapts for the other team. And there were lots of quotes by Columbus after the game about how, like, we just play the way we play. We don't worry about the other team. That's where I want my team to be. I want to be a team that plays the way they want to play and then doesn't give a crap about what you do. We're going to do what we do because we're great at it. And that's what I'd like to see. And too often that we're seeing Dallas change formations, change tactics, flip guys around. I mean, I don't mind tactical adaptation, but I don't like it where your whole game is like figuring out a way to stifle the other team rather than just, here's what we do, try and stop us.
Yeah. Well, it was a fun, entertaining MLS Cup. It's also weird to see LAFC play so differently this season compared to last, which is another weird.
They need a
oddity.
refresh.
Yeah, they do.
Let me
they're still really good, though, right?
Yeah, let me throw an example of a good defensive team that's what I'm talking about. Think about the way Oscar's teams played here and in Orlando. They're a more defensive team than some of these others we've talked about, but they just play the Oscar way. They play the same way all the time. Right? When he was here, think about that. Like, they never really adapted for other teams. They just did what Oscar wanted them to do, and they were good at it, and they won the Supporters' Shield once and tied for it once, right? It's like, we're who we are. Even though it was defensive, it was still aggressive. And that's what I want. You can be defensive as long as you don't necessarily just roll over for people. Be aggressive about it.
By the way, speaking of Oscar, the mustached one, Tom Bogert, also has reported this week since we last spoke that Oscar and crew are in line to sign a new deal to stay at Orlando, and that to me would be a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, I guess he likes the situation there, or maybe they wanted something specifically. I'm surprised that no one has come in and tried to get him. Maybe the offer wasn't there, or maybe that was the leverage he needed to get what he wanted. I was a little bit surprised too that they're not necessarily as locked in on Muzi. They were still talking to Muzi, but weren't like, who's the TD down there who came from Dallas sort of with or Oscar or right before Oscar and then told them to hire Oscar or one or the other. So that seems to not quite be the partnership that I thought it might be. But
well, it just makes me wonder if the ownership has promised Oscar some sort of increase in spending. Remember, they were the lowest salary team in the league that finished, and he also finished second in the East. Had a fantastic season. Go ahead.
You remember part of why he left here was that he never got Dallas to give him give him the 9 he wanted.
No, they gave him Cobra.
Yeah, and there was,
or was it Coleman? Which one was it?
Coleman.
It was Coleman. Yeah. They was like, "Are you serious?"
There definitely was some noise from Oscar when he said, I trust our ownership to give us what we, something like that, like about a month ago. And maybe you're right. Maybe that was the thing. Like, I'm not re-signing until you agree that you're going to let me buy some, because I'm doing this on the lowest roster in the league. You're going to give me some assets and let me buy some people. And they've cleared a couple of DPs since then. They let Perea go, for example, who, granted, is like 34, but they're obviously setting themselves up. And you're probably right, Peter. That's a really good point. That I bet he was like, I'm not re-signing unless you agree. And that's probably what that trust line is for. Okay, I trust you. You better do this now.
Or maybe he just really likes Harry Potter World.
He might. Orlando's a great town. It's hard to complain about that. They have a pretty good academy too.
Oh, do they? I don't know anything about their academy.
Well, Inter Miami, has, jumped them in terms of star power. But, one of the reasons why they went after Muzi was because of the FC Dallas Academy. And one of the reasons why they went after Oscar was because of the FC Dallas Academy. There's a lot of talent in Florida.
Oh,
so their academy's pretty good. I mean, it's not, so far it hasn't paid off like Dallas has paid off, but they had to build it from, even though they already had an academy when those guys got there, it wasn't any good. Like their MLS Next team at the time was like the worst team in that level. So it's like, it'll take them some time, but they're definitely getting better and winning some games in the academy. So, so is Inter Miami, of course, who's already really good because of their star power.
And then just the last thing, I don't think we have anything else to talk about. Did we, please remind me, we did not last week talk about a follow-up to my fever dream about the old Texas Stadium site.
We did not.
Okay, so for anybody that missed the episode, I literally had a dream that was, I think, built off the fact that I drove past this plot of land the other day in the course of my day, and I had a dream about the idea of building a soccer stadium on the old location of Texas Stadium, which still is essentially an empty lot used as a staging place for highway development. It's all the gear and crap they're using to, build roads and stuff.
Yep.
And I have no idea. I don't think there's any existing plan. Well, we all know in the last few weeks, Mark Cuban's announced that he's selling the Mavericks to the Sands Corporation and the third richest woman in the world. Well, I think since the last time we talked, Buzz, I think D Magazine put an article up pointing out that same company and woman bought a plot of land directly across 114 from the old Texas Stadium location to build, at least in theory, this casino facility that Cuban and she wants to build in the Dallas-Fort Worth area if, in fact, betting becomes legal. And I just thought, man, that just makes it all the more perfect to put a soccer stadium across the street.
Yeah, it's no coincidence that land deal closed before the Mavericks sale did. Like they were basically waiting for that land deal to close before they could announce the whole thing. And I'm sure that there's some confluence of hotels, potential sport books, maybe a music venue, a Mavericks training facility, maybe like a D-League team playing there, or G-League or whatever it's called now. Maybe even a Mavericks games if they don't like AAC long term. You can see the possibilities there and why the Mavericks have gotten in bed with him and why he sold things like, everything but the team, right? He sold the marketing and the broadcasting and there's worries in his part about what's marketing, where's money going to come from if it's all streaming and not these big, huge money deals anymore. All that's not something he has to worry about anymore. Now this person that's in the casino, betting, entertainment business will worry about it. And if it lines up where FC Dallas someday needs a 70,000 seat stadium and that place has still got a spot, that'd be amazing.
Well, I don't even know if they need a 70,000 seat stadium.
Well, they don't right now, but there's a day we dream of.
Well, let me just say this, and this is all I want to put this up front. This is total 100% speculation on my part. and I'm
It's
sure
dream
Buzz
even.
is, yeah, it's total speculation, is this, which is the reality. I mean, for a long time, we've heard what feels like now for the last at least 2, if not 3 years, that there have been ongoing conversations about modifying the stadium in Frisco even further. And a lot of it was predicated on the idea of building some sort of facility on the east side that may have some sort of sporting or sports betting component to it, like a hotel, a casino or something, doing something with the sore thumb that is the stage, replacing the east side. And here we are, essentially at the beginning of 2024. The World Cup is going to be here before you know it, and I don't think there is enough time to do any of that anymore.
No.
Right? So here's where my speculation comes in. When I hear the story of Cuban and this Vegas company and that rich woman spending all that money and in theory to build a place like that, it does get me to a place where I begin to wonder, is the fact that they haven't yet done anything, they being the Hunts, that they're considering other options that do not include Frisco? Because there is a price to buy themselves out of that deal in Frisco with the school district and Collin County. I don't know what it is, but it just makes you wonder if, in fact, all of these rich people are starting to hedge their bets that betting is coming to Texas sooner than later. Maybe there is something to the idea that if they're going to put a sporting facility, a betting facility in Irving across the street, that maybe that old Texas Stadium location may be used for something like a stadium. I don't know.
Sure.
I just,
Sure.
And the Hunts are willing to partner on that deal.
Yeah, well, when we've talked for a while about the idea that whatever was going to happen at Frisco included sort of this idea of a hotel, of a music venue, of a sports book. That was always in the discussion. And when I talked to Dan Hunt 2 months ago, I think it was now, that was my literal question, was like, okay, time has run out in terms of having something done by the World Cup. Are you still doing this? And he said, originally the idea, of course, was to have something done by the World Cup. But he said that doesn't change the fact that we're using the World Cup as the impetus to do what we're going to do, because we think that the business payoff with the explosion soccer we'll see from it is worth it. So again, at that time, I was asking about Toyota Stadium and he answered about Toyota Stadium. Mm-hmm. But as you say, Clark is no dummy. He's a billionaire for a reason. And so let's throw this in there. Like if and when something starts to happen with the Mavericks, if you see things like a complex of youth soccer fields at that location, that would get my attention. Is it another MoneyGram? Is it something then is Dallas interested? What if there's a 5,000 seat outdoor stadium that North Texas SC could play in and have 20 youth fields? And then we're partnering on that level. Is there a bigger outdoor, so like if details emerge that lead us to sort of hint that direction, that'll really perk my attention, because that's a much better central location for either one of those two things. Like, how long do you want to stay, for example, just to pick a business model, how long do you want to stay with North Texas at the stadium at Choctaw in Arlington? The FC Dallas really loves these youth field complexes. It's a revenue stream for them that they can run them like they run MoneyGram, like they run Toyota, with the training fields on the outside, because anything out Dallas is doing is going to need to have that component. FC Dallas, I mean. So there are ideas there, Peter, in your fever dream in terms of the way it is now, that if we see these kinds of details, we'll really start paying attention to what the hell's going on over there, because then that makes you go, oh. A lot of people don't know, for example, that the Rangers built a baseball youth complex and academy in West downtown Dallas. It's across the Trinity there. I don't know if you've ever seen
Trinity Groves.
Yeah, it's west of Trinity Groves. It's between that and as you go sort of southwest back towards I-30, it's in there. I drove past it one time. I was like, what the hell? I didn't know about it. So like those kinds of complexes matter for these pro teams now. Like Cuban's talked about, hypothetically, a model of almost bypassing college. He loves the FC Dallas youth model, where he wants the Mavericks to run youth club, like from 10 years up all the way through to the pro team. Like, he loves that idea. How do you do that? Well, part of that would be some sort of complex and some sort of training center, some kind of small stadium for a G League team. There's a million ways you could pay this off over the next 20, 30, 40 years for Cuban that'll be worth paying attention to, especially if you are FC Dallas and you don't necessarily, I think in the end though, Peter, that they're married to Frisco at this point.
I think so. But here, let me just throw something else out because this was obvious to me when we were dealing with the Messi game. And this was one of the things I thought about as I was leaving that traffic disaster. The biggest problem for me with expanding the existing Toyota Stadium site to the point where you're including a hotel and a sports betting facility and all of that is the well-documented known problem of ingress and egress of Toyota Stadium. I'm not an engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but I drive around Dallas a lot, and I don't know how you solve that problem. Like, I literally can't, in my head, figure out how you resolve the ingress and egress problem of Toyota Stadium. I don't know if there's an engineering solution for that.
Yeah, you can't make that stadium much bigger than it is in terms of because of the local, all that's around it, really, and getting on off the highway. It's already a mess, as you say.
So that's always what takes me back to this idea of I wonder if they've gotten to a place, because they've allowed all this time to go by, that they've got something else. I don't have a problem with it staying in Frisco, right?
Yeah.
They could build a new stadium in Frisco, for all I care, just something that's easier to get to in terms of coming off the tollway or wherever it is. Now, I don't know if that exists, but you see where I'm going with all of this.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. All right.
My biggest corollary to that is that it's the Hunts. And the Chiefs still play at Arrowhead. And they don't strike me based on their actions as the kind of people that go, you know what? I'm dropping $2 billion into a facility. They just don't. They upgrade and they pick at it. I mean, Arrowhead literally is the same as it's been now for, since 72.
But if the word that we've been hearing that their dream is to do some sort of sports betting component, maybe they do what Cuban did and they partner with one of these existing Las Vegas companies. Yeah, maybe. I mean, they kind of already been having, this flirting with one of those companies as a sponsor for years, and Choctaw. I'm not discounting what you're saying. I think it's as viable as anything. The Hunts don't strike me as a team that has an ownership group that is that far-visioned, ambitious, and aggressive about their spend. Yeah. They tend to be long and slow play of decades of incremental, tiny little improvements rather than, you know what, I'm going to build a $2 billion new NFL stadium with 300 luxury suites. They don't do that. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It just dawned on me that, man, all that we've been sitting here talking about what's going to happen with the second expansion of Toyota Stadium for a long time now. And man, the World Cup is right around the corner, and we've run out of time for them to do that for the World Cup. In a hypothetical world, I absolutely love it. I think it's an amazing idea. It's the Hunts. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like the Hunts. It feels like Cuban. It feels like Jones. It doesn't feel like the Hunts. Yeah. So, all right. Well, let's see. You had a couple other things on the run sheet here. You wanted to congratulate somebody. Yeah, there's a kid in the academy named Mason Grimm. He's a U19. He's going to SMU. He scored the goal of the tournament. They had this little MLS Next Flex, it's called. It's a big scouting tournament. Dallas played really well. I think they went 9-3 as a collective. So good performances. But he had the goal of the tournament. He scored from midfield against somebody. So congrats to Mason Graham. It was a nice goal. It was like the Cooper midfield goal, just blasted it. That is cool. So, yeah. The clip's on Facebook and YouTube and whatever. I'm sure I tweeted it out. You can find it if you're interested in it. But congrats to him. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Well, how have we done today? Well, the last thing I mentioned was, do you want to talk about the idea conceptually of will Dallas sign a homegrown this winter? Last year we had Nolan and Tark Scott. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that on the run sheet, Buzz. I threw that out as one a little extra there. At the bottom. Yes, of course. Yeah. Well, again, it's just about context, and I'm afraid that the short-term answer is I think probably no. But I'm going to talk about. I think it's important to talk about why I think it's probably no, and one of the reasons is the kid that they just signed from Romania Canadian is 17. Right? Effectively, that's your homegrown in a lot of ways.
because that's a kid that's in high school basically age. So that probably ate up a lot of it. And then you have to look at one other factor is like I've been talking about. There was a little bit of a drought coming through the academy, and then we were going to hit this little bit of a bubble where there was a lot of kids that had potential, and we're sort of hitting that. Nolan and Tarek Scott were the first sort of wave of that, and those are the two they picked last year. Well, this year you're getting into a group that had some interesting guys, but the thing is that they already actually all signed them to North Texas. So they signed Malachi Molina, Alejandro Urza. They signed Dylan Lacey, who actually was a year older. They signed the kid from El Paso, Diego Garcia. So like that's where, if you're looking for, how come they didn't sign any homegrowns from this group? Well, they did. They're just all on this hybrid kind of deal or had this potential future homegrown deal with North Texas, because this is a continued case of this coach doesn't want kids. He doesn't want a 15-year-old on his first team roster. So Dallas is really not interested in that super baby Dante Seeley, Paxton Pomacall, Jesus Ferreira, 16 years old, Brian Reynolds, 15 years old. They're not interested in that anymore. So, if you're looking for there to be this signing and there isn't one, you're like, I don't understand. The Dallas Academy sucks. It's dead. It's all, no, it's just going through North Texas now. This also would have been when Matthew Corcoran, remember the kid I was raving about that went to Birmingham? Peter?
Yeah.
This would have been his class. They had there's a couple of guys that are still like on the fringe that again might become North Texas players. So the process is still working. It's just we're in its current situation where Dallas doesn't want these teenagers anymore on their first team. They barely played Nolan. Tark Scott, if he hadn't gotten hurt, might have been more in the mix. And there's nobody right this minute. There's nobody that has like that fringe of the first team vibe. Those dudes are at North Texas. Diego Garcia is the leader of that, who had a really great season last year and is a 2006. He's the guy that's closest to making this crossover now that they passed on Hope Aveyu. And there's one more guy I want to talk about. I've been talking about Anthony Ramirez for years and years and years, right? You remember that name? Mm-hmm. He's the kid that's been a Mexican youth international, U.S. youth international for years and years and years. He's a little bit younger, so he's still in the academy, even though he's a 2005. The problem is they just signed this kid, again, the Romanian Canadian, same position. They signed that kid from Barcelona where they traded for his homegrown rights from Chicago. Do you remember that story?
Yeah.
Same position. So like, as much as I like Anthony Ramirez, Alan Velasco, same position as Anthony Ramirez. So like they've signed 3 guys that play that same position. Well, I think that means that you're not going to, why would you go get a 4th one? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So I think, a guy that I thought was going to be a homegrown for like 3 or 4 years now is not going to be. It's not a kid I think is going to go to college. I'm sure he'll end up in Mexico or something and not with FC Dallas. Hopefully they're not going to regret missing on him in a couple of years, but they've obviously gone a different direction. So anyway, again, context is what matters. And people will say, oh, the academy sucks. Look, no homegrowns. Well, it's more complicated than that. They're at North Texas instead.
Well, that is a FC Dallas Nerds Dream episode.
It is. That was a very nerdy dream episode. That's what we do, though, right? Isn't that our ballpark?
We super serve the FC Dallas curious, Buzz. That's what we do here.
It's a massive market. It's a really good business plan to go after.
We only failed to deliver any kind of information on kit stuff. So
yeah, man, I got nothing on kit stuff.
I don't either.
Yeah, they're doing a really good job with that. They better stay, with the hoop. That's all I'm scared about. Even if you don't like it, it's been there for 15 years. You got to accept it now. It's like it is what it is. So just do it for real, right?
Yeah, sure. We'll see.
Bye, Steve Davis.
All right. I don't have anything else, Buzz. Would you like to know the result? Would you like to know the fate of your Newcastle side?
I know.
Oh, you already know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, let's give a shout out to Steve Davis for repping FC Dallas gear on his trip to Europe, his annual soccer trip.
Oh yeah, to England. Yeah.
Yeah, he went to the Ted Lasso bar and took a picture of himself all in FC Dallas gear out in front of the Ted Lasso bar.
Oh, good for him.
That's fun.
That is great.
I'm jealous of those trips. So good.
Yeah, he and those guys are good guys. I bet they had a blast. I don't know what games they went to this season or this year. But
I didn't look. I thought the Ted Lasso bar was pretty cool, though. I want to go there.
Oh yeah, who wouldn't? That would be a lot of fun to go to Richmond. And
that place is going to be like Cheers now. It'll be Tourist trap.
That and the bar that's next to the racecourse ground in Wrexham.
Yeah.
But both those places were, either a hole in the wall or relatively nice, tiny little, pub, and now they are tourist traps of the highest order. No doubt about it.
How many years, by the way, before the people of Wrexham are now pissed off that 50,000 people not from Wrexham are coming in every weekend and destroying their town and taking over their stadium?
It'd be interesting to talk to somebody and kind of get where the meter is on that already at this point.
Yeah.
Because I've been told by a couple of people that have been to games at Wrexham since the show has come on that it already is very much a significant percentage of people in the stands that are there because of the TV show and not because they're from Wrexham.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's gotten to the point where people, like, there's a significant percentage of people in Wrexham that are annoyed by that yet. Because I think they're all still very much in the wow, this is amazing phase. But you're right. There's going to come a point where it becomes such a thing that it's like, okay, wait a second. It's like the Miami situation. Like, wait a second. You want us to pay how much to go to these games?
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see.
I mean, I'm a cynic, I guess. I was watching the most recent season, and that's the first thought I had was like, I can see a day where all the old school fans are now standing outside the stadium, like chunking bottles at all the tourists that are taking all the tickets. And now they hate the owners and,
Oh yeah, for sure. You can totally see that.
Careful what you ask for, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's sometimes success is a two-edged sword, but look, there's nobody in Wrexham at this point that would go back.
No, but you can see a day that they'll be mad.
I mean, look, they're going to be playing in League One next season, it looks like at this point. They're having such a good season.
Spoiler. Yeah.
Well, no. I mean, if you're paying attention to the table, I think they're in first place in League Two already.
Are they really? I noticed Knott's was doing really well. I thought, what a fun story that is. Those two teams going up together.
So anyway, okay. Well,
I will tell you to bring that back to FC Dallas, Peter. I'm already that guy with FC Dallas. Like, this season where they're selling out all the time or they're full all the time, it actually annoys me. Like, I go to games now and I'm pissed off that I can't man spread and take up 2 or 3 seats and there's people around me.
Gross. I don't want to hear you talk about man spreading.
Well, you know what I mean? Like, my big old fat ass covering, like, my arms are on the seats next to me and, put my feet over the seat in front of me or...
Yeah,
I can't do that, and I have people that want to come around, or I have to listen to some Yahoo say dumb stuff.
The aforementioned ingress and egress problem is exacerbated by this. Yes, totally.
It's like I almost don't want to go to the games already, let alone like if they're actually sold out. It's like, I'm such a bad old man. I want to go back to post-COVID when it was you and me and like 5 other people. I know it makes for terrible atmosphere, but
awful thing to say, Buzz.
I know. I'm probably going to end up watching all the games on my sofa.
You're so right.
Yeah.
I did it this year, so.
I know. We'll have to see how it goes next year. I might halfway through
that Apple TV presentation is pretty damn good, my friend.
Save me an hour drive either way. Dan can sit in the press box. That's cool. I'll just stay.
I get to listen to Steve Davis and nod my head furiously at all the things he says that I agree with.
Right. Yeah.
So very good. All right. Well, listen, Buzz, thank you so much. What's going to happen between now and next week? What in the world would we possibly talk about next week?
Well, between now and then are the actual things like re-entry drafts and free agent pickups and waiver drafts and the actual real draft will have happened. So like between now and then, we might actually have a couple of new players to talk about. And then, who they are will tell us a whole bunch, or what position they are more than anything, what kind of player they are will tell us a whole bunch about which direction this thing might be turning or not. So that's kind of what we're waiting for, is the club to do some things. So we'll come up with something for a pod. I mean, we'll do one. It'll be, maybe it'll be 10 minutes. And this one went over an hour again.
Ooh, damn it.
Yeah, I know.
Do that.
I don't know. Sorry, nerds.
We are super nerds. No doubt about it.
Third Degree, the podcast, has been brought to you by Soccer90.com. Our partners over there have everything you could want for the holiday season. Get all the gifts for all your family, your friends, the jerseys, cleats, socks, T-shirts, sweatshirts. Man, they probably even got sweatpants. Man, they got everything. Shorts. I know they got shorts, special team shorts. If you're listening to this podcast, you can get 20% off with the code Third Degree at checkout. 3RDDEGREE at soccer90.com. Some exclusions may apply.
Thanks, Buzz. Good times.
Yeah. Thanks, you, man. Appreciate you being here.
Any old time. Thank you, FC Dallas Curious fan. We'll do this again next week on another episode of Third Degree, the podcast.
Merry Christmas, Dan.
Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.